Celebrating over a decade in the solar industry, Dana Clare Redding is a passionate solar professional dedicated to the development of distributed generation solar globally. Growing up in a small Rust Belt town in Western Pennsylvania, the environmental impacts of fossil fuels shaped her perspective, particularly for disenfranchised communities and those most vulnerable. Realizing this need for environmental justice and greater resources, Dana founded Solar Stewards, a social enterprise connecting corporate social responsibility initiatives with schools and universities, affordable and senior housing, places of worship, and nonprofits in marginalized communities. Dana holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Drexel University, woo, Drexel, as well as an executive MBA from IE Business School and Brown University. She volunteers on multiple committees dedicated to equitable renewable energy development, including the Nature Conservancy and Clean Energy Buyers Alliance Standards Steering Committee, the Vote Solar Access and Equity Advisory Committee. She's also just Magazine's 2021 50 Fixers, a two-time judge at the DOE NREL Solar District Cup, a co-founder of BOSS, Black Owners of Solar Services, an inaugural American Council of Renewable Energy Accelerator member, and serves on the Solar Energy Industries Association Board of Directors. She currently resides in Atlanta, Georgia, where she continues to work at the intersection of climate action, environmental justice, and social entrepreneurship for communities worldwide. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dana Clare Redding. Thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause and some emojis for our first speaker.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for reading all of that. I really appreciate it. And I'm very proud to represent Drexel today and share a presentation that's close to my heart, and certainly, hopefully, inspiring those that are embarking on a clean energy career. I'm going to find the full screen in this here. I feel like it used to be control. Here we go. Here we go. I'm gonna get it. All tools. I'm sorry, y'all. You'll see why I'm there. It is. Boom, full screen. Man, we gotta have the full screen. Okay, thanks for your patience. So I'm Dana Clare Redden. I'm the founder of Solar Stewards, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all about my journey to renewable energy and equity and how important that is right now. My presentation is called Design Thinking for Systems Change, and we'll get into how design thinking can really help us to facilitate more equitable systems, including and especially in the renewable energy industry. I won't spend too long on this slide since you heard my bio, but I'm proud to represent these organizations, particularly BOSS, Black Owners of Solar Services, that is showing the industry that we're out here, we have businesses, and we're ready to do business and close the wealth gap in our communities. I'm very proud that we're also a inaugural member of the Justice 40 uh, Accelerator, which was a mandate that said that with all of these new programs, the IRA, that 40% of the benefits need to serve historically excluded communities. And yes, we are a social enterprise, and I'll get into that as well. So I'd like to start off my presentation by, taking a look at the past. Well, really inspired by the symbol and the philosophy, if you will, of Sankofa, which is a symbol and a way of thinking that derives from Africa, specifically the region that is now the country of Ghana, that just reminds us that it's important to look back in order to inform the future. And Sankofa literally means to look back and get it. So it's super important to really think about our society and how we can learn from the past failures, particularly with systemic oppression, to inform better ways in the future. And then, of course, personally, which I will do, thinking about my time at Drexel, thinking about my earlier career and how those all really led to the work I'm doing now. So I did want to highlight, and it's especially timely, President Biden yesterday in Arizona actually issued a formal apology to Native Americans regarding the genocide and the uh, mistreatment is a light way to say it, of them, in the colonization, of America. I actually put this presentation together prior to yesterday, but, I am inspired by the timeliness of that apology, well overdue, but very meaningful. And I want to talk about how I ended up at Drexel University. Interestingly, my mom was inspired by the founder of Drexel University, Saint Catherine Drexel. She wasn't canonized or a saint at the time in the Catholic Church, but this lady was a very wealthy. A nepo baby, if you will, in today's terminology, came from a very wealthy banker family, but she actually ended up reading this book called A Century of Dishonor about the classic expose of the plight of Native Americans and was inspired. So it's just one thing that can really inspire your whole journey. And she used that to really inform her career in order to open schools for Native Americans and Blacks at the time, and she faced a lot of opposition. Again, she wasn't a saint at the time, because of her privilege. She actually had an opportunity to sit down with the Pope at the time, and she told him, "Hey, I read this book, and boy, we really need help over here in the west of the United States." And he said, "Yeah, why don't you do it?" I love that. So she did, and she actually, as a wealthy woman, turned her philanthropy into something impactful. But I will say that in revisiting this history, now that we have a better understanding of how Native Americans were treated in some of these schools, really made me dig into it a little deeper. It certainly sounds like a really great story, but we know federally these boarding schools that were founded for Native Americans were abusive and de- deprived them of their culture. Now, I dug into, did Catherine Drexel had a hand in this? Were those her schools? Well, they weren't the federal schools. Hers were, religious schools. Although I did find this particular statement here that students did not have to be or become Catholic to enroll, and the schools expressly renounced assimilation as a goal. So that makes me hopeful that those schools were, not the same as some of the ones that we have been hearing about and that President Biden has apologized for just yesterday. So I'm from Pennsylvania, Western PA specifically, and again, we're looking at a little bit of history, recent history now. Um, I had done a couple hikes in the pandemic. I went home. 2020 was it, yesterday or was it 4 years ago? We really don't, it's hard to keep track. But, in that time, I had a good hike with my mom on Rager Mountain, but we didn't get to finish because the wind was coming in. It's getting eerie. So we wrapped it up shorter, and so in a couple years, I thought, let me go back and do this hike, and I Googled, and it just so happens that we have another climate disaster out of the Cambria County region. I found this headline from Bloomberg. So growing up, I was impacted by the impacts of coal and fossil fuels, acid mine drainage, mountaintop removal, slag piles, etc. The rivers being orange and smelling like rotten eggs. That's how I grew up, and although I didn't pursue a renewable energy career at that point, and I'll get into that, I certainly remember that degradation. But unfortunately, I have to deliver the news that the same exploitation and extraction goes on in that Cambria County, and this Rager Mountain methane leak made the list of top 10 climate disasters in 2020. You can see us kind of this yellow mark crop dusting the rest of the state. That's actually methane. This is a satellite photo. And so, it's continues to be something that we all need to get behind and work hard to address. This isn't something that happened in the past. It currently happens, and this is a result of fracking. This little star you see on the screen, that's actually where oil was first discovered by Europeans in Oil City in Titusville, Pennsylvania. So I think it's, quite ironic to be so close to the epicenter of most of this, where this trauma environmentally really originated. So I mentioned I'm from Western PA, Johnstown, Pennsylvania, to be specific. It's a small town, and we're known for some other history, the Great Johnstown Flood of 1889. And so, growing up, I've always really found myself being entrepreneurial. One of my well, the first enterprise I had was Teasel brand cat toys. I think I was a little ahead of the curve now that cat toys actually or pets are a billion-dollar industry. But that being said, just being entrepreneurial in my small town, of course, I was pointed to reading about a number of these Gilded Age, coal and steel magnates, including Andrew Carnegie out of the Johnstown, Pittsburgh region. And this individual, we'll call him Andy, he had a club, a South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club that was up on the hill above Johnstown. And it rained too hard for 11 days, and the dam that was creating that man-made lake burst. The water traveled down through the valley and killed over 2,000 people. So not until 9/11 have we had another man-made catastrophe kill so many people at once. This tragedy really shaped my town, but also, in thinking about Andrew's legacy of libraries. So, I'm talking to my mom about my entrepreneurial visions, and telling him about, her about, oh, Andrew Carnegie, what a great businessman. She said, that was his dam, right? That was his dam that collapsed actually as a result of him not maintaining his property, because there are multiple warning signs that that dam was we would call that criminal negligence in today's time. And so this really taught me that as business progresses, as the history of business, there is no excuse for negligent practices as a business owner that's going to absolve anybody of doing the right thing. If philanthropy coming back, buying a bunch of libraries, calling yourself a hero, not going to absolve of doing good business practices from the get-go. And that's what led me to a career in social enterprise. Additionally, this is my dad here. He was a second degree judo black belt, taught a lot of judo. And one thing about Pops, may he rest in peace and power, is judo is an interesting sport that uses an opponent's weight and balance against them. So we really take that inspiration in that, Johnstown was called, I hope we're a different stat right now, but we've been named the poorest town for quite some time, poorest town in Pennsylvania. And so what we do at Solar Stewards is really take these stigmas, these labels, and turn them on their head. And you'll see how we do that. So I went to Drexel University for interior design, which has always been a beautiful a passion of mine. Really inspiring to influence spaces not only for their aesthetics but their function and also accessibility. I really enjoyed being able to design spaces thanks to the Americans with Disabilities Act or ADA to create more accessibility for folks. But this design thinking really applies across industries, and it's what has helped me to innovate within the renewable energy industry to bring solutions to the communities that we focus on. And so, as you can see in this uh, visual, the design is really a circular opportunity. It's not a linear one step after the other. And so we use design thinking in the creation of social enterprise. We use it in the formulation of community benefit agreements. We use design thinking in everything. And it's such a great foundation and thankful to Drexel for having a interior design program. It's one of the reasons I chose the university. And, we've got to big up design in all of our solutions. So if we've got any design majors in the house, I see you. So I mentioned social enterprise. Social enterprise is really that in between philanthropy and your traditional, uh, for-profit business. It was Milton Friedman, the economist, who said, the social responsibility of businesses profits. That's very outdated, and it was wrong to begin with. So I'm glad we're at a impasse that we can revisit some of these really incorrect assertions, externalities, as they're called in the economic sphere, or basically the pollution or things, that they consider external to certain business models that they don't have to pay for. Those are not external to everybody. Ask a historically excluded community that lives next to, that landfill or that coal ash pond, what is external. And so, we really want to make sure that these externalities and their costs are covered in the business model, and I think social enterprise is one way to address that. So I also want to talk about the nonprofit sector. Sometimes it's used as a tax shelter for billionaires, millionaires, and folks, as we saw with Andrew Carnegie. You can't necessarily philanthropy your way out of responsibility, and so I encourage everybody, if you want to do social good, find a way to do a business. Also, to close this wealth gap, which has been created as a result of systemic oppression over generations, of unfair wages, denial of opportunities to get loans through redlining to buy property. We have a stark wealth gap between white Americans and those black and brown uh, partners and citizens in this country and in this world. And so we know that the number one way that those that have means have acquired them is through businesses. So think about that when you're thinking about doing social good, that you can do both at the same time. You can create wealth for your community and your family, you can own intellectual property, and you can have a business. So this all leads to a career in energy. I was living in California after graduating and was just really inspired at the time by what I happened to find out was some really great policy in California, the California Solar Initiative. And that incentivized the placement of solar on site, and so, I really went down a rabbit hole of, this is the technology that could really serve to, accomplish so many things, to uh, close that information gap, where folks, needed access to technology, and, you need power to power that technology, the domestic issues with being dependent on oil as a country, the energy burden, which is defined by the percentage of energy a household pays to keep the lights on. And in certain communities, historically excluded communities, that's a lot higher. But how can we apply these in a more equitable way? And distributed energy resources specifically speak to a new system, and you can see by this very helpful diagram of um, putting that renewable energy source on site. So you might consider this to be rooftop solar. It's basically any renewable technology that you can stick on site. Actually, doesn't have to be technically renewable. We, of course, want it to be because of climate change, but specifically, we're talking about generating power where it is used. And in that way, we can add additional resiliency. And I think now that we're seeing increased storms and weather events, having that localized model is increasingly important. But currently, the way that corporates buy renewable energy is typically your utility scale. So your big farms that are, in rural areas, multi megawatts, and we enjoy that. That's certainly also important. But those particular uh, projects don't connect directly to communities. And so we sought to incentivize distributed energy resources. When corporates buy their renewable energy, traditionally it's been from those utility scale projects. And now we're finding disparities in who can develop distributed energy resources and who can't. And so that is how Solar Stewards has discovered a way to innovate within existing markets to bring that incentive to those particular distributed energy projects. So picture a community center, right? This is a community center where your seniors might come to do their jazzercise. It's where you might play some ball in the evening. It's where, you know, you might take a nice little swim. It's also where you might need to charge your phone. It's also where, you know, you might have a cooling and heating station if it gets too hot or too cold in your neighborhood. And, you know, we have increasingly issues with that, that you can shelter. And so, you know, those are the type of applications that we incentivize. Every time a corporate buys renewable energy, they're buying a renewable energy credit. You could call renewable energy credits the currency of renewable energy. And so it was very helpful that there was already a mechanism that we could, you know, take. So this is design thinking. I always love design because it works around obstacles. It works with what's already there. So what's already there is this uh, renewable energy credit market. And we thought, why can't corporates buy their energy directly from impactful projects? And why can't they pay these communities that have these projects that, let's say, on the top of that community center? Why can't they pay directly for those? And they can. So again, renewable energy credits, market-based instrument that represents the property rights to the environmental, social, and other non-power attributes of renewable energy generation. Basically, it's every megawatt hour that's created. You can certify it, you can register it, and it can become a renewable energy credit. And then you can sell that separate from the power, as you might see in this diagram. We've got the renewable energy in the middle, and then the power goes to the grid or directly to the actual, let's say, community center. And then they can sell that renewable energy credit separately. It's called an unbundled rec to a corporate. And then what we do is take the proceeds of that sale and pass 100% of it to the community through a community benefit agreement. So again, we pass 100% of the proceeds to our community partners for community determined social impact initiatives. It's really great to have solar, you know, on a library. It's great to, you know, make sure that, you know, we're incentivizing these projects. But even beyond that, it is critical that communities have that economic opportunity to be included in this renewable energy transition. And so that's what Solar Stewards works um, very dedicated to this particular objective. In addition, we have community benefit plans that are required in some new EPA awards from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. We're looking to turn those plans into actual agreements. Plans are, you know, the best made plans, as they say. And so we want to make sure that there's accountability to these particular awardees, that they deliver on those plans and create binding agreements and track those agreements. And we do that as well because the community benefit agreements are the same mechanism by which we pass that social rec revenue on to communities. So you see this QR code, feel free to scan it. It'll take you to our link tree. Please follow us on LinkedIn or Instagram, and you'll see links in that link tree to our socials to keep up on some of our news. And I'm excited to take some questions for you. And thank you for listening to my presentation.
I see all the emojis in the room. Great job. Great job.
Appreciate
Thank you.
that.
Thank you very much. I believe we have, okay.
Okay, should I just read the, oh, I see no open questions in the, okay. We don't have any. I can call it early.
So please, you can utilize the raise hand function if you'd like to ask Dana a question. I see we have one hand raised. Ariana, would you like to ask a question?
I'm so sorry. I did not mean to raise my hand.
No problem. You want to tell us where you're calling in from?
I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm a student at Howard University School of Law.
Excellent. Well, we're seeing a lot of progress through the courts for climate justice. I'm really inspired by some of the youth in Utah that have been moving a case against the state of Utah for violating their state constitution. So I'm very, as though, even though Solar Stewards chooses the business community for that change, it definitely legal avenues to affect change as well. I see a question from Kellen or a raised
Hi,
hand.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. My name is Kellen Robinson. I'm a 1L at Howard University School of Law. I'm one of Professor Waterhouse's students. So my question is about whether you can share like a victory story or something similar to um, how you stay motivated in this work, because with any work with justice, especially with energy and dealing with, so many lobbyists for oil and things like that, if there's a story that you can share where, um, your work, you could see the fruits of your labor. Thank you.
Yeah. Wow, that's such a great question. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to think about some wins. Well, our objective is to get communities these funds, right? It's great to win an award or speak on certain things, but then you gotta think about, okay, well, where how are our community partners doing? And so I'm proud to say that we're pushing up against almost $1 million of social rec commitments to various communities across the country. And so, when we hit that milestone officially, you'll see us popping off on socials. Very excited to continue on that. And similarly, it is just the community partners that keep me going. One thing about business, I mentioned intellectual property. You want to make sure that your IP is sewn up real good, because there are definitely are IP infringers. One thing that I love to use as an example is um, that one whiskey brand that's very popular. Over the years, we found out that is actually an enslaved man who helped come up with that recipe. And now there's a whole uh, distillery, I believe it's called Uncle Nearest, that makes whiskey from his recipes. So for years, uh, particularly the Black and community in America, but all those historically oppressed had no opportunity to own their own ideas, and so it is utmost importance that we make sure that when we start these enterprises and innovate, that we can own our own ideas. And we had a couple infringers a couple years ago. I mean, it's business; it's going to happen to everybody. But to see the way that our community partners really jumped in on socials and said, "Are these social recs?" Because um, we're going to pass at least 10% to communities just doesn't sound like what we want to do. And so, seeing our community partners really step out and let those folks know that you know oh, no, you don't. That was just so satisfying because we really want to continue to deliver those opportunities. So those two examples really made me feel good, and I appreciate your question and thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Next, we had Gabriel. Go ahead and unmute.
Hello, my name is Gabrielle Moore. I am a student at Howard University. My question is, could you touch a little bit more about how like the climate crisis really affects like marginalized communities the most? I heard a statistic that around I think 50% of Black and Brown people live in environmentally hazardous conditions. I don't know if that's true, but I was just wondering about how climate change affects like marginalized communities the most. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, one, it's proximity. There's this phrase called sacrifice zones where, we put and we as in this country and around the world, globalization, put our less desirable and toxic sites next to communities that don't have as much, let's say, agency, and their voices have been squashed and disenfranchised. And so, they call these quote unquote sacrifice zones. So there's living next to those sacrifice zones. It's still true, and it's been true for decades, that race is the number one determining factor on whether or not a person lives next to environmental degradation. Unfortunately, with some of the recent Supreme Court decisions and the will to avoid lawsuits at the government level, we have not included race in certain tools like the Climate and Economic Justice Screening tool. But doesn't make it not true. So we look at certain proxies. Also, with the legacy of redlining, that has basically denied loans to Black and Brown communities, so they were not able to take advantage, particularly after the Second World War, of the GI Bill and the big housing boom, and build generational wealth with real estate. Those types of impacts, that those types of systemic oppressive measures have actually, compounded to, less desirable housing stock. Which means that, when we go in and we want to talk about solar, well, the roof needs, an upgrade. The windows are inefficient. So all of these just compound. To the lack of financing tools for certain communities, the lack of the distribution grid infrastructure, which is a still, I mean, all of these are still issues. But when we go to connect these distributed energy resources to the distribution grid, no surprise, in some neighborhoods, those grids were never designed to hold that type of capacity, because no one ever really wanted to enable businesses in those communities. So it's just a compounding issue. And this revolution of renewable energy, this industry that we're now onshoring thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, is a once in a generation opportunity to really unravel some of these systems. And if we're not careful, they will persist. So I appreciate your question. And the Climate and Economic Justice Screening tool is a really cool tool that you can see, the results of the systemic oppression, and what neighborhoods we can really key in and zone into.
Wonderful. And then there's one question in the Q&A. I think we have time for one more question, if that's okay,
Okay,
Dana.
sure.
Thank you for your presentation. This is from Anne. Thank you for your presentation. My question is, how would you approach implementing energy justice thinking when it comes to community engaged projects?
Thank you for that question. How would I approach it? Well, from the community standpoint, the community knows what's best for them. And a lot of equity work can sometimes get caught up in a very uh, paternal, I believe the word is, way of thinking, that, some outside expert for some other reason, whether it be education or some just type of misinformed entitlement, thinks that they know better than that community. And, that's a universal thing. Just because I come into a community, with Solar Stewards, doesn't mean I know what's best for them. And so it's very important to have a community-centered approach. And at Solar Stewards, it is as simple for us as, hey, what do you want to use these social rec funds for? So for instance, in couple school districts in Indiana that T-Mobile is the off taker, the social rec purchaser for, we said, what do you want to use these funds for? And I originally said, hey, we got a lot of STEAM stuff, a lot of STEM stuff for you. And they said, yeah, thanks. We already have funding for that. We want to use it for maybe a mental health counselor. So, those types of taking a step back and allowing communities to tell them what's important to them, it leads to the type of solutions that really are needed and critical. They ended up using it for a robotics class and to pay for a full-time school nurse, which is pretty cool. And then when we think about the health and environmental nexus, why wouldn't it be a nurse? Why wouldn't it be mental health? So very exciting when you step back and just let communities tell you what's important to them.
Well, thank you very much again, Dana Clare Redden, for that Q&A and that presentation. Is there a way we can contact you? You want to share your socials one more time?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me put my LinkedIn in the chat. And then of course, LinkedIn, and I advise everybody, if you're not already using LinkedIn for your career, it's a very great tool. And actually Microsoft owns it, and they're one of our climate stewards. So gotta shout them out too. Shameless plug. But yeah, please follow Solar Stewards on LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn, and you can send me a message. Be happy to chat, and thank you all, and wishing you the best on your career journey. And thank you for prioritizing energy justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day. Let's give